Okay, so let's take and go back to page 54, the end of chapter 5, or chapter 6, excuse me, and let's read over that vocabulary so that you know how it's pronounced, and repeat after me for each one, if you would please. This will be for the quiz next week. Shana, means year. Ohel, means tent. Kodesh, means holiness. Ahav, he loved. Seem, to place, and that is an infinitive form when you have the middle vowel, like with a hirik yod, like with the holam wow or the shurik in the middle. The verb is given in an infinitive form and not in the form that is translated he placed. That'll be different. Shalach, he sent or he stretched out. That is stretched out a hand, to reach out with a hand. So hand will be in the context as the direct object of that verb. Afar, means dust. Rosh, means head. Kadesh, he was holy or he sanctified. And the reason it's marked there in your text as not in the Cal is that this form you see here, Kadesh, is the Cal form, but it never occurs in the Old Testament. It's a different form, Kidesh, that will occur. But we learn the vocabulary this way because it's the way it's listed in the lexicon. Ma, what or how. Shame, that's name. Heikal, temple or palace. Me, this is an interrogative. It always has a question. Who or whom, if it's the direct object. Choshek, darkness. Aron, is ark or box. And that ark is not like the boat that Noah was in. It's like the Ark of the Covenant in which the tablets of the law were kept. Azav, he left or he deserted. Shuv, to return or to repent. Another of those middle vowel verbs. Its form when it's he returned or he repented is actually totally different. It becomes shav instead of shuv. Chata, he sinned. Asaph, he gathered. Mayim, that's the word for water. Then on page 60, at the end of chapter 7, the vocabulary here are the prepositions discussed in this chapter. So the table, that's 2 tables above that, is one that will do the unattached prepositions. And the other prepositions are on page 57, where we have the 3 unattached, or the 3 inseparable prepositions that are attached directly to words, the same as they are here on the board, that you have a lamed with a schwa, beith with a schwa, and kaf with a schwa, or kaf with a schwa. Those are the normal forms. We'll talk about other forms, other vowels that come under it. This symbol is merely to show that something else is attached. This is not a yod. That's just an abbreviation symbol. So that's pronounced this, la. That means 2, 4, and about 21 other meanings, depending on context. Ba can mean in, by, with, and a number of other meanings. Ka means as or like. And then back to the page 60 with the table there at the top. And we'll read that from right to left, each row. Kamo, like or as. It's the same kaf preposition as what we just went through, but here it's attached to something, and it's translated like or as. Achrei. It also finds the form acher, which we had earlier in vocabulary, meaning after or behind. Lifnei, before or in the presence of. Literally, it means to the faces of. That's the literal rendering of lifnei, is to, the lamed preposition, attached to a word that means faces of. To the faces of means before or in the presence of. El, one that we've already had, meaning unto, to, or toward. Mul, a preposition meaning opposite or in front of. Eitzel, meaning near or beside. Min, means from. This is a very frequent preposition. You'll see it many times in the Hebrew. Eighth means with, and the form should be corrected there in parentheses to look like this on the board. It should have the makef following it. So make certain it's written that way. That's the form it takes when it's joined to a following word by the makef. Neged means in front of or opposite to. Bain means between or among. Saviv means around or surrounding. Bali means without. Ad means until, as far as, or up to. Al, it's one we've had before, meaning upon or over. Can also take you can also use on, although I prefer upon in most cases. Lama'an, and here again you have a lamed preposition attached to another word in order to form this preposition, in order that or for the sake of. Im means with. Aver means beyond. And tachat means under or instead of. Instead of means in the place of. Okay, so if someone's dying in place of, instead of someone else, as a substitute, then you use tachat in that type of situation. Any questions on the two vocabularies? This will be the quiz for next time we meet. Chapters 6 and 7. All right, let's go back then to chapter 5, or 6, excuse me. Keep thinking 5. It's chapter 6. The article and interrogation, and let's review again what we went over the other day. Go through it quickly, just to remind us, get this repetition, and then we're going to do the exercise number 6. We'll have you pull that out, through that, and we'll grade that in class here. Rule number 1 on the article is that you have the article will be attached inseparably to the noun with which it belongs. It will have a he as the primary part of that article, the he, and it'll become a prefix to that noun. It'll have a pathic vowel under it normally, and it will have a doubling dogish in the first letter of the noun to which it is attached, unless that letter is a guttural. Then it will change. All right, here we have a noun, melek. Everyone pronounce it, melek. And we put the article on, it becomes hamelek. Good. Kol means voice or sound. Hakol means the voice or the sound. Yom with the article is hayom, means the day or today. Shame means name. With the article Hashem means the name. Layla means night. With the article Halayla means the night. Berit means covenant. Habberit means the covenant. Habberit. Okay? Rule number 2. When you have a guttural, it changes. What's the rule of the guttural that causes it to change? Gutturals refuse to be doubled, or they refuse the doubling dogish. In that case, you compensate for that rejection by heightening the pathak to a comets. The pathak is the short A-class vowel, and the comets is the long A-class vowel. So with a noun like ear, pronounce it, which means city, it becomes ha'ir, the city. Rosh means head. Ha-rosh means the head. Ohel means tent. Ha-ohel means the tent. Erev means evening. Ha-erev means the evening. Ruach means spirit. It can also mean wind. Becomes ha-ruach, meaning the wind or the spirit. Adam
Adam.
By itself, Adam can mean Adam, the proper name, or it can mean man, specifically a man. But when we put the article on it, Ha-Adam, it means the man. Ha-Adam. Everyone?
Ha-Adam.
Okay, good. Rule number 3, we attach the hay inseparably to a strong guttural. Notice those previous gutturals, if we go back and look at that, the ayin, the rosh, and the aleph, or the resh, excuse me, the ayin, the resh, and the aleph are all weak gutturals. They're weak gutturals. The strong gutturals, remember, are cheth and hay. So when we have a strong guttural, we've used the pathic instead of the comments. So heikal becomes ha-heikal. Palace becomes the palace. Hevel means vanity, means emptiness, becomes ha-hevel. And then choshek becomes ha-choshek. Becomes the darkness. Who is a pronoun meaning he, but it's also a demonstrative pronoun meaning that. And when the demonstrative pronoun that is describing another noun, like that house, and that's a definite house then. If we say that house, it's a particular house. So house will be habayit, the house. And so the adjective, the demonstrative adjective defining it as that house, has to agree with it, so it takes the article. So who becomes ha-who. And it won't be translated as the he or the that. It never is translated. The article is never translated on this. It is just for the purpose of agreement with a noun. Chesed. Chesed has the idea of steadfast, loyal love. It's covenant love, steadfast love, unmoving love, unending love. And in the definite, ha-chesed. The covenant love, the steadfast love. Chitti has the word, it means Hittite or Hittites, depending on context. If we want to say the Hittite or the Hittites, we have to say ha-Chitti. Good. Rule number 4, when the hay article is attached inseparably to an unaccented hay with the comments, ayin with the comments, or cheth with the comments, notice all 3 of these with the comments, you have a segol and no dagish under the hay. All right, so this rule number 4 is that the hay article is attached inseparably to those gutturals that have comments under them and are unaccented. That's one of the keys, unaccented. If it's accented, it'll follow a different rule, but it's unaccented. It becomes a segol, and there's no dagish because, again, the gutturals refuse the doubling dagish. So afar, meaning dust, becomes he-afar, the dust. Akev, meaning heel, H-E-E-L, like on your foot, becomes he-akev, the heel. Chazak, which means strength, becomes he-chazak, meaning the strength. Anan becomes he-anan, meaning the cloud. Hamon, that means multitude, becomes he-hamon, meaning the multitude. Rule number 5. When you have a situation where you have the accented guttural, hay or ayin with the comments, then there is no dagish. Again, the guttural rejects the doubling dagish. But in the accented case, the article will not take the segol as it does in the unaccented case. It takes the comments. So av, another word meaning cloud, av becomes ha-av, the cloud. Eretz. Eretz is a special situation. Its regular form without the article gives it as 2 segols. It's a segolate noun. But when you go to attach the article to it, that first segol has to change, and it becomes aretz instead, and therefore the article will become he with comets. Because of that change, there are 5 nouns that make that change in Hebrew that change that vowel to a comets when you add the he. And because they change, then the he article has to be a comets also. Okay? So eretz changed to aretz, therefore the article has to have the comets under it. Follows the same rule. And it is accented. Notice the accent there above it. So eretz, a land or earth, becomes haaretz, meaning the land or the earth. Har means mountain or hill, and it changes as well. When you add the article, it's going to change to a comets. Because a comets is under that he then, the article has to have a comets because this is the only syllable, so it's obviously the accented syllable. So it becomes hahar. It's not laughing, it's just hahar, all right? The mountain or the hill. Am, people, is another word that when it takes the article, it's going to change to a comets, becoming am, and therefore it becomes ha'am. Everyone? Ha'am, right, the people. Any questions on the articles, on those 5 rules? Remember to watch for the he prefix. And watch for the he prefix that has a pathic, a comets, or a segol. Notice we didn't talk about a he with a hirik because there is no hirik in the article. It only takes those 3 vowels, no other vowels. We didn't talk about a holum because it doesn't take a holum. We didn't talk about a kibbutz. It doesn't take a kibbutz. So if you see a kibbutz, a holum, or a hirik, or a tsere associated with a he, or a shurik following it, or a holum wow, or a hirik yod, or a tsere yod, it's not going to be the article. The article will only be a prefixed he that has a comets, a pathak, or a segol. And most often it's going to be the pathak, and it's going to have a doubling dagish in the first letter of the noun it's attached to, unless that's a guttural, which rejects it. And then that causes the change that takes you to the segol and the comets. Okay, any other questions? Any questions? Okay, let's go to the interrogative he and review that. It's the particle that introduces a sentence and lets you know that it is a question. So the question mark comes at the beginning of the Hebrew. Now, one caution here. In Hebrew, this interrogative he is probably only used about 30% of the time that you have questions. Questions are determined by many other factors. Determined by one of our vocabulary words, me, meaning who. Who will go for me doesn't begin with an interrogative particle because you already have the interrogative pronoun who, me. All right? The same goes for ma that we'll talk about. What, how. It's interrogative already, so it doesn't require the interrogative he. And then sometimes the question is just known by context that it's a question. Perhaps a verb used with it. A verb for ask can give you the clue. And so if there's any other clue or the context is fairly clear, this interrogative he will not be used. But when it's used, it's up front. It's always on the first word of that interrogative sentence, that question. It's always on the first word, not on the second word, not on the third. It's always on the first one. So it's the signal. And it normally is a he with a hatif pathic under it. So if we take the word shamer, everyone? Shamer. What does it mean? Forgotten your vocabulary already? He kept. Look at the vocab quiz I just returned to you. He kept or he watched, all right? But if we put heshamer, everyone, heshamer, it becomes then, did he keep? Did he keep? All right? Does he keep? Will he keep? Tenses are not inherent in the verb forms themselves. Those are determined by context. And so this can have many different translations. At least three different times. Lo shamer, everyone? Lo is the negative, meaning no. So he did not keep, or he will not keep, or he does not keep. If you wanted to say, did he not keep, does he not keep, will he not keep, you put hello shamer. All right? Hello shamer. Everyone? Hello shamer. Notice it goes on the first word. It goes on the first word of the question. If we have another question, this is one you're familiar with from Genesis chapter 4. When God approached Cain after he killed Abel, he asked him where his brother was. And remember Abel's response. It was Shomer Ahi Anoki. Everyone? Shomer Ahi Anoki. Literally, he was saying, and this, if you don't have the question on it, is, I am my brother's keeper, but with the interrogative hey on it, it becomes the question. Am I my brother's keeper? You see how it changes? It's on the first word here of this sentence and becomes a question. So it changes to a question. All right? Rule number 2. When that interrogative hey is attached to a word that begins with a guttural or with a schwa, the Hadapathic becomes a pathek. First of all, if you have a word like this, shemartem, everyone? Shemartem, which literally means you keep, or you kept, or you will keep, masculine plural. It's referring to a group. If we want to say, will you keep, do you keep, did you keep, have you kept, we had hash martem. Everyone? Hash martem. It changes to a pathic because you cannot have two schwas together at the beginning of a word. You cannot have two schwas together at the beginning of a word. And so therefore, this becomes a pathic. And the second schwa becomes silent. All right? And it takes the same vowel as was in the Hatafpathic. Notice there is no dogish in the sheen. If there was a dogish in the sheen, this would be the definite article rather than the interrogative. Okay? Ata, second masculine singular pronoun, personal pronoun. Ata, you, masculine singular, becomes ha-ata because it precedes the guttural. Ha-ata. Everyone? Ha-ata. Rule number 3, the interrogative hey will be attached inseparably to a word beginning with a guttural, and it will have a sigol if that guttural has a comments under it. We saw that before when it was a what? Unaccented comments. In this case, it doesn't matter if it's accented or unaccented. So it becomes chata, becomes he chata. Everyone? He chata. Did he sin? It's an interrogative hey. It's not the article. If this were a noun, chata, if it were the noun, the accent is on the last syllable. You have an unaccent first. You'd have the same situation, wouldn't you? You'd have the same situation. So here's a case where if the verb and the noun are the same form, then you'd have to tell by context whether it's interrogative or whether it's the article. Now, fortunately, what's happened here is the Hebrew language will change this and put a hey on the end of the noun, so that you can tell that it's a noun rather than a verb. Avad is a verb, meaning he destroyed. Everyone pronounce avad. Avad. And if we put it on did he destroy, it's he-avad. Everyone? He-avad. Okay? Now, the interrogative pronouns, rule number 1, the mem he is attached by means of a pathak, a makef, and a dogish to non-gutturals. So melech, king, becomes mamelech. Everyone? Mamelech means what king? Or means how is the king? Okay? Katav, he wrote, becomes makatav. Everyone? Makatav. What did he write? What is he writing? What will he write? Nahar is a noun that means river. And if we want to ask what river or why a river, then it would become Man Nahar. Everyone? Man Nahar. And then Yom, day, what day, would become Mayom. Everyone?
Mayom.
All right. Rule number 2 is when that ma is attached to gutturals, like the aleph, the hey, sometimes the hey, and the resh. In other words, we're taking 3 gutturals. It's not the cheth and ayin. We're taking the aleph and resh, which are weak, the hey, which is strong. So we have mixed relationships here. Aleph, hey, and resh. It takes a kametz and a makef. So regel means foot. Ma regel, everyone? Ma regel means what foot? Ata, you, becomes ma ata. Everyone?
Ma ata.
What are you? Adir. Adir means mighty. Ma adir can mean how mighty. Ma adir. Everyone?
Ma adir.
And then had davar is the word. Okay? We put the interrogative on it. What is the word becomes ma had davar. Everyone? Ma had davar. Notice it's because it's before the hey guttural that it takes the comments. And then rule number 3, the mem hey attached to by makef to the noun or the verb, whatever follows it, is changed to a segol if the gutturals have a comments. Here the ayin has a comments. Asita means you did, or you performed, or you made. What did you do, or what have you done, becomes me asita. Everyone? Me asita. And then asita can also have the same thing without the makef. Without the makef. Haya, he was. Me haya, what is he? Or what is it? Everyone? Mehaya. Mehaya. Okay? Eoni is my iniquity or my guilt. Now notice you have the guttural, and it doesn't have a comments under it. And that's because the fact that it has a first common singular pronominal suffix attached to it. That hirik yod means my. The normal form of eoni, the regular form, is aon. And that's what the Hebrews are thinking of. They're thinking of the regular form, and they're saying because it normally has the comments under it in its regular form, aon or awon, depending on how you pronounce it, which in modern Hebrew is usually avon, where the wow becomes 2 things, both a vowel and a consonant. Eoni, it becomes me'eoni. Everyone? Me'eoni. Okay. It means, what is my sin? What is my sin? What is my guilt? All right, any questions on those matters before we move on? Yes, on Rule 2.
Is ayin part of the guttural?
Ayin is a guttural.
No, in the Rule 2 that you mentioned, only aleph and hey and resh in your slides.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Ayin can also be involved in that, yes. Ha'ir, just as you have there on 2C on page 52. Okay? What did they do in the slides?
You didn't have ayin. You had 3 already.
Okay, let me go back to that and make certain here. Let's look at that. Right there. Rule number 2. That's the article, not the interrogative. Interrogative, hey, you're talking about instead of the article. Okay, it just says guttural there, and I didn't give additional examples, but it is included. Yes.
Interrogative
Pronouns, that's right.
Oh, you're talking about interrogative pronouns, still a different rule. Okay, let's go back to this one. This rule here?
Ayin is not there.
No, ayin is not there. and that is interrogative pronouns. And I have ayin in here. You could have an ayin, but I have not given it there. It's rare, but it does occur. Okay? All right, thanks for clarifying that. All right. Okay, yes, Scott.
Question along the same lines. Am I missing something on the same section? We've got
On page 54?
On page 54, 2C lists the hay, and then 3C also lists the hay.
Correct, because they both occur. Both can occur. As you have a footnote to that first hay that explains that there are two different treatments that occur with hay.
Right, I read that. We just have to learn those?
You just have to learn them, yes. Right. And I don't suggest that you memorize exceptions like that unless I focus on it and tell you to memorize it. All right? I don't like to have too much memorization because that kicks out the important stuff if you do that. All right? So learning the rules, you have to watch out. Don't focus on the exceptions unless I focus on them. Okay? Yes, Jeremiah.
I have a question on pronunciation, and this
Yes.
came up in the interrogative hay under 2B. Are you emphasizing so that we get it like with the ata and then it's
Yes, I'm
ata?
overemphasizing it because I'm almost emphasizing it as though it's a secondary accent under it
Okay.
when I pronounce it, but you
when we
don't.
say it, it'll just be hata. It'll almost blend together.
Yeah, it'd be ma'ata, ma'ata, ma'ata. In other words, the first two syllables will be the same force. It will not blend. It doesn't become mata. It's ma'ata. Okay, you still pronounce it. Don't blend them. Good question. Okay, any other questions? All right, let's take the exercise then. Pull it out. Trade with someone near you. And we're going to do this in a slightly different way this morning. I want 4 of you. I want Scott Basolo, I want Chad, I want David, and I want Jeff to come up, please. And stand up here at the board at these 2 sections. There's a marker for you, marker for you, marker for David, and a marker for Chad. Yes, you better have your exercise with you. You might need it. Or have the other person's exercise with you. So at least you can see what word, all right? Okay? So Scott, I want you to take the first word, Evan, write it on the board and add the article to it. Chad, take the second word, bore. Jeff, take the third word, bakor. And David, take the fourth word, zahav. Write it on the board and put the article on it. Okay, if you have it done, close the pen and lay it on the lectern. All right. And up here, this has a missing part of it here across. Okay, so Evan becomes ha-Evan. Okay, ha-Evan. Bor is habor, okay? And bekor becomes habbekor, and zahav is has-zahav. Notice the dogish and the zayin. The dogish and the zayin, very important and significant. All right? And then if we could have James Wood and Dennis and Kyle and Kelly. Okay. Question, Scott Jackson?
And we let all coming up. two seagulls, I thought that changed to a comment on that first one, under the olive.
Only for 5 words in the Hebrew does it change.
Oh, just those.
Just
words.
those 5.
Oh.
All right, so it has to be Eretz, not Evan. Only 5 words. They're given for you in the text. Okay? All right, let's see, you're missing one? Okay, so let's see. I'm going to take James, if you would take number 5, Zerah, Dennis, number 6, Oyev, and Kyle, number 7, Yeled, and Kelly, number 8, Gan.
Doctor, if I change those, is the marker wrong? If I got the ending wrong, if I change that to a comment, is that wrong?
Yes, it's wrong.
Okay.
Correct. Any part makes it wrong. Any part wrong makes it wrong. Like if you forgot the dogish, it makes it wrong. If you have the wrong vowel, it makes it wrong. If you changed a vowel, you shouldn't, it makes it wrong. Okay, if you haven't finished, you can close the marker and lay it on the lectern and return to your seat. All right. Number 5, Zerah becomes Hazerah. Oyev becomes Ha-Oyev. Yeled, watch out here, that looks like a wow here. And it should be a yod, it should be short. So Yeled becomes Ha-Yeled, and Gan becomes Hagan. Notice the dogish here, the dogish here, the dogish here. Okay? All right, let's erase these. And John Strickland, Gus Pedal, Kenny Fox, and Scott Jackson. Why don't the 4 of you come up now? And John Strickland, if you would take number 9, Or, Gus, number 10, Afar, Kenny, number 11, Gamal, and Scott, number 12, Basar. Yes?
I read elsewhere that if the yod or the pei has a schwa underneath it, that they do not receive the doubling dogish.
That's only in certain situations, and you're not going to see it in anything here. It's very rare. And it's primarily in places like where you have a verb form and not a noun necessarily. So there's a bunch of rules that are involved there, but
Do you ever attach the article to a verb?
yes, you do. Another rare thing, but it does occur. Okay. All right. So number 9, Or, becomes Ha-Or, the comets. Afar, notice it's unaccented, so this should be what? Should be Segol. It's unaccented, therefore it should be Segol. Should be He-Afar. He-Afar. Hagamal, for Gamal, notice the dogish and the pathic, and Ha-Basar, pathic and dogish. All right? Those are 4 more. And let's see, I might want to make certain we get everyone in here. James Lee and Eric and John Milcon and Tom Patton come up. We're going to give this is equal opportunity employer, okay? Every one of you has an opportunity. Tom, if you would take Kokav, number 13, and Eric, if you take Emmet, number 14, and John, take Hoshek, number 15, and if you would take then James, number 16, Ayin. And there's an eraser back there on the lectern if you want to use it instead of your hand. That red will make you look like you're bleeding. And I haven't even got to your exercise yet to bleed on it myself. The Gimel, written how? and the G in Greek, there's a relationship there, especially in the Paleo-Hebrew, but not in this script. All right? So let's take a look at these. We have number 13, kokav, becomes ha-kokav. Notice the dogish in there. And then we have emet is ha-emet. And by the way, there is an error in the printing of the text there, the study sheet. There should not be a segol, should not be a schwa there next to it. So change that. Just put an X through that schwa. You can't accent a vocal schwa, number one. That's your first clue. All right? It should be a regular segol. Okay, so it's ha-emet. And then we have ayin. And remember that this is accented on the first syllable here. Okay, so ha-ayin and ha-choshek. Okay, any questions there? And let's see. See, Chad, we had you come up, didn't we? Yes. But Kyle, you've escaped so far. So Kyle, you've been up already. Okay, Kempis and Franz and Greg and then James Wood. Did I catch you, James, already? I got you. And I got Scott. And I got Dennis. Roger, did I get you? No. Okay, so Roger. All right. So Kempis, take number 17, Levav. Here's a pen for you. And Greg, take number 18, Chok. And number 19, Franz, Abwel. And number 20, Nahar. Then Roger. By the way, I want to compliment you on all of you, the way that you're doing on the forms of your letters. I've noticed in your exercises, as well as what you're doing up here on the board, that you're doing a good job. That's progress. Think about where you were before you even knew what these letters were, and when you first tried to write them, and what you're doing now. It's good progress. Okay, when you have those written, just close the pen, lay it on the lectern. All right. So we'll take a look at number 17 is levav, becomes ha-levav. Notice the dogish in the lamed. We have chok, becomes ha-chok. It's before the strong guttural, maintains the pathak. And we have awel. Awel is accented, not unaccented. Because it's accented, it's the comets. If it were unaccented, it would be the segol. Here's your clue. All right. Nahar is not a guttural, so it's doubled. The doubling dogish here, it's han-nahar. Okay. And then let's see, who's left that we haven't had given the privilege to? Okay, Jeremiah, George, and Mike. If the three of you would come up. And Jeremiah, if you would take number 21, chatat. And if George, or Mike rather, Mike take Av, and George take Oz. Number 23 for George. Just lay it on the lectern here. Okay, thank you. All right, so we have chatat is chatat. And notice the dogish in the taith is there in the noun form. It has nothing to do with the article. Notice it was there before you even began. This is the guttural that rejects it, but it's a strong guttural, therefore this is a pathic, so it's chatat. All right? Av is ha'av because this is accented. Accented. And az is ha'az because this is accented. Therefore, it's a comma. It's under the hay. And then going down, number 24, heikal is ha-heikal. Hay with a pathak. Hay with a pathak on number 24. No dogish. Number 25, hayom, hay with a pathak, doubling dogish in the yod. Doubling dogish in the yod. Number 26, chakam. The chayth with the comets is unaccented because the accent goes on the last syllable. Therefore, the article is a hay with a segol. He chakam. Hay with a segol for number 26. Number 27, regel. Regel becomes ha regel. Hay and comets. Number 28, lechem becomes ha-lechem. Hay with a pathak and a doubling dogish in the lamed. It's not a guttural, so you keep the normal form of the article, including the doubling dogish. Number 29, chazak. Chazak, the first comets under the guttural, is not accented, so the article is a hay with a segol. Hay with a segol. Number 30, shamayim. The first letter is not a guttural, so it's a hay with a pathak and a doubling dogish in the sheen. And it doesn't matter this time where the doubling dogish was written in the sheen that you're looking at. If they put it on the left-hand side, just ignore it for now, maybe circle it, but it should always go on the right-hand side. It should always go on the right-hand side. Okay? But that's something you wouldn't have known until now. All right, let me just make one more reminder and write it here on the board. And I'm going to write over this so it'll show up better with the black. But as we're looking at this word, the question came, how do you know what article to put on this? And the question came not just from one of you, but from several of you. How do I know? Because you say that if the comets is under a guttural that is accented, then it's one thing. If it's unaccented, it's another thing. How do I know? And you were thinking that the accent mark would occur if the syllable was accented. The accent only occurs if the normal place of accentuation is not where the accent will come. So most words are unmarked for accent. And when it's unmarked, the accent is always on the last syllable. Okay? If it's not going to be on the last syllable, then the accent is marked. So on this, you don't see an accent because it's one of those situations that Hebrew words are accented upon the last syllable of the word unless otherwise marked. Okay? So that's why this is he-afar, because this is unaccented, because far is the accented syllable, even though it's not marked. We just know that because Hebrew words are accented on the last syllable of the word unless otherwise marked. Okay? It's a good rule to remember, and it's one that we can just forget from time to time. James?
Now, would you know by the vocab whether that's the article or the interrogative?
Would we know by the vocab whether that's the article or the interrogative? You'd know by context. Context. All right? The big 500-pound gorilla in Hebrew is going to be context. Context, context, context. It's kind of like this. If we take the word grip, and you're just learning this English word isolated from anything else, what does it mean? Is it a verb to grip something? Is it grip, which is actually a disease or a physical problem? Is it the strength of your grip? You know, there's a number of different possible meanings, and you can only tell by context in a sentence. And the same goes in Hebrew. The context will help you in determining many of these situations. Okay? Yes, question, Franz.
But with the interrogative hey and the pronouns, would they be preceded by a soft pasuk or a siluk necessarily or not?
Will the hey or the interrogative pronouns be preceded by?
Yeah, in the sense that if it's a question, if it's a beginning of a, is that normally the
Okay,
beginning of a
I see what you're
sentence?
saying. Okay, if we have a question, does the question always begin at the beginning of a verse?
Yeah.
No, it does not. Because many times you'll have, God asked the man, and then you have the question. And that's way deep inside the verse. So it's not always the first word in the verse. No. Okay, good question. We're on chapter 7 dealing with prepositions. First, we'll deal with the inseparable prepositions. Again, what are the three inseparable prepositions? La, ba, and ka. La, ba, ka. Sometimes we just refer to it as the lamed preposition, the beith preposition, and the kaf preposition. All right? Lamed, beith, kaf. Lamed preposition, beith preposition, and kaf preposition. And they're given there more or less in the order of their frequency. Lamed is far more frequent than beith. Beith is far more frequent than kaf. Kaf is the least frequent of the three. So the first rule, number one, of the inseparable prepositions, those three prepositions, and that's all we're talking about, is that normally they are pointed with a schwa. Normally they're pointed with a schwa. So vocer, morning, becomes levocer, to morning, or at morning, or for morning. Okay? Levocer. Adam becomes le-adam. Le-adam. For man. For Adam. To man, or to Adam. Nahar, river, becomes benahar. Benahar. Ba is in, so it'd be in river. In a river. In a river. Okay? Afar, dust, becomes afar. In dust. Question, Jeremiah?
Will the article go between those two?
No, we'll get to that. The article will not go between. We'll talk about that later. Okay, good question though. And watch for it. We will explain that. It's very important to learn. Okay, ish is man. Ka'ish, as man. Like a man. Lot, the name of Lot, becomes kalot, like Lot, the nephew of Abraham. Okay, so this is the normal form of the preposition. It is at the beginning of a word, and it has a schwa under it. Okay, that's rule number one. Rule number two, words beginning with simple schwa take inseparable prepositions with hirik. Why? Two schwas cannot occur back to back at the beginning of a word. Okay? Two schwas can occur back to back in the middle of a word. Two schwas can occur back to back at the end of a word, but not at the beginning. So something has to change. And in this case, then, if we have meragel, which is the word for a spy, it becomes limragel. And limragel, excuse me. The schwa becomes silent. Limragel. For a spy, to a spy. Okay? With a spy, bimragel. Like a spy, kimragel. All right? So the first schwa that normally occurs underneath that inseparable preposition must change. And it changes to a hirik. You just drop off the bottom dot of the schwa, and it becomes a hirik. All right? Everyone clear on that one? Rule, oh, by the way, before we go that far, Yehoshua. Yehoshua is the name Joshua. If we want to take Joshua and we're going to add to it, then the thing to do here is to take the schwa under the yod and remove it. Why? Because in this case, the hirik is followed by a yod, and when it's followed by a yod, then the yod ceases to be a consonant and becomes part of the Hirik vowel. So instead of saying le Hoshua, which you can't really do, because that makes the yod and the schwa vocal, which it is in the regular unpointed form without the inseparable preposition. It's a vocal schwa, but when you add that preposition with a schwa, the Hirik is a short vowel, and it closes the syllable by means of the following consonant. Well, a yod has difficulty closing a consonant, because just as in English, a y, just a consonantal part of it after a vowel just doesn't exist. How can you make the yod, the y, excuse me, on the end of day into a consonant, you see? It joins with the vowel, and it's indistinguishable. The same thing happens in Hebrew. So when that Hirik is followed by a yod, then it becomes a Hirik yod. The yod becomes a vowel instead of consonant. So instead of saying le Yehoshua, Hoshua, you say li Hoshua. Li Hoshua. Li Hoshua. Okay? Li Hoshua. Yes.
Is that also why the schwa drops out underneath the yod?
That's why the schwa drops out underneath the yod, because the yod cannot retain its consonantal power in this situation. Okay? All right? Rule number 3. Words beginning with composite schwa take inseparable prepositions with the corresponding short vowel. Okay? So if you have a word beginning with a hatif pathic, what vowel is going to be under the inseparable preposition? A pathic. The corresponding short vowel is out of that same form. Hatif pathic is pathic, hatif segol is segol, and hatif comets is the comets hatuf. Okay? La esot is what the preposition becomes. Edom becomes be Edom in Edom. And oniya, oniya, better pronounce that correctly, oniya, which means a boat, and it's a comets, which is a comets hatuf, and it becomes ka oniya. Yes?
So it's a comets hatuf under the preposition, even though it's not a closed syllable?
It is considered to be the equivalent, which is a comets hatuf, but it's not going to be pronounced as a comets hatuf because it's in an open syllable. Technically, that comets under kaf is a comets hatuf, but it's not going to behave like it. Why? It's technically that because it's supposed to be the corresponding short vowel of the hatif comets, which is it's a comets hatuf hatif. All right, so it's a hatif comets hatuf, technically. But what happens is you just go with the comets, and it's pronounced as a comets, not a comets hatuf. It isn't ko onia. All right? It stays as a ka. Ka onia. It's one of those things is a rarity. It's what some consider an inconsistency in the Masorete's rules for these vowels. But they just say, well, if you know the language, you know what this is. You know, well, it takes a while to learn it. Okay, John?
What is the accent on that? It sounds like it's...
It's at the very end. It's ka oniya.
How come it's not marked then?
Because the last syllable is never marked. It's the last syllable. If it comes on a different syllable, then it will be marked. Okay? All right? All right. Elohim, accent on the last syllable, becomes what? It changes. Again, here, instead of a short vowel, the aleph, when it has the hatif segol, changes to a tseri, and the aleph is totally silent. It becomes leilohim, leilohim, or beilohim, or kelohim. Any of the inseparable prepositions. Another exception to the rule. Okay? Rule number 4. The inseparable preposition usurps the position and the pointing of the article. This gets to Jeremiah's question. What happens with the article in such cases? Notice what happens. Melech is a king. We put the article on it. Hammelech is the king. But it becomes Lamelech if it's for the king. Notice the hey disappears. But the vowel that was under the article becomes the vowel under the preposition. And the dogish forte stays in the maim, so you have a double signal that the article is there. The double signal that the article is there is the pathak and the dogish forte that tells you that's for the king. Okay? Let me go over that one more time. In the normal addition of a preposition, the inseparable preposition, those three, la, ba, and ka, when they're added to a noun that has the article, you determine the rule for the article on the noun, and then you remove the hey and put the preposition in the place of the hey. That's all you're doing. So whatever the rule is for the article is going to stay, but the hey is going to be replaced by the preposition. That's all that occurs. You replace the hey with the preposition, and the vowel and whether or not the dogish are there is determined by the rules governing the article. And all you do is have the preposition replace it. So if you have Adam, if we add the article to Adam, remember it's ha-Adam. Aleph rejects the doubling. So if we're going to say for the man, then or as the man, and I need to adjust that. I see now looking at it on the screen here, looks like I can't line it up evenly, but the ka-Adam, all right, takes the same pointing as the pointing for the article. You just replace the hey with the preposition. Whether it's kaf, like the man, or lamed, for the man, or beith, with the man. They'll all have the same pointing because the pointing of the article. Afar is he-afar, the dust. If it's in the dust, it's be-afar. You just replace the hey with the beit. That's all it is. So there's no new rules regarding the vowel. No new rules regarding the dogish. It's the same rules as you learned for the article. All you do is just remove the hey and replace it with one of those three prepositions. Scott?
Regarding the previous word, Adam, and the methane accent in there.
Yes.
Is there any way we can tell when that's inserted and when
No,
it's not?
you just have to learn the forms. It's just something you have to learn.
Not with the comments
No.
or, okay.
No. Okay, it's just something you have to learn. There's certain forms that do and many of them don't. Yes, Chad.
Isn't there a rule that the third syllable starting from the end, if it's a long vowel, it would take the methag, or am I misremembering that?
That is only a partial rule, and it does not occur in all cases. It explains certain occurrences, but not all occurrences. Okay? It's one of those things we run into in Hebrew. For every rule, there's an exception. For some rules, there are many exceptions. All right? Anyone else have a question here? Is this clear? All you're doing is taking the hey off of the article and replacing it with a preposition. So the pointing of that article is still there, and therefore the article is still there. Franz?
So if we were to say a man or as a man, would that just be the normal schwa under the...
Be the normal schwa. Correct. Be a normal schwa. Ke Adam. Ke Adam is like a man. Le Adam, for Adam, or for a man. Yes. All right? Any other questions? Rule number 5. Okay, inseparable prepositions immediately before the accented syllable of a word in pause. An accented syllable of a word in pause. By the way, in pause means there is a major accent. On the worksheets I returned to you, several of you, when we were talking about being in pause, you talked about changing the vowels. Well, number one, when a word is in pause, every word in pause does not change vowels. There are only certain vowels that change in pause. In pause has more to do with the accent than it has to do with changing vowels. The point is that a word in pause is a word with a major disjunctive accent. That's far more important than changing vowels. And it is true that in some vowels, a word in pause changes that vowel, but not all of them. In fact, most of them do not change. So keep that straight. In pause has to do more with accentuation than anything else. Okay, rule number 5, mayim. Okay, notice that this is one of those cases where it did change, because the regular form that you just learned for today, went through for the vocabulary for the quiz on Tuesday, is mayim, a pathik under it. In pause, here with the saluk, a major accent of the Hebrew text, primarily being the saluk and sof pasuk and the athnak, then it becomes mayim, and if you put a inseparable preposition on it, it will take a comments. It becomes la mayim. Okay? If we have shevet, shevet is at the athnak. You see the athnak to the left of the first sigol, so it's in pause. Notice that the vowel does not change on this one in pause, because it's only some words that change, not all. But because it's in pause, the vowel under the preposition becomes a comments. That does not represent an article, by the way. That does not represent an article. This is the normal pointing of the preposition alone. The preposition alone. Okay? The preposition min is a special case. Rule number 1. Before non-gutturals, in other words, not the aleph, not the hey, not the cheth, not the ayin, not the sometimes resh, but all other consonants, the noon is assimilated. That means it's joining with, but it disappears. And the compensating of a dogish forte is used. So you have melech, king, a king. Mim melech is from a king. From a king. Notice the dogish that represents the assimilation of the noon on min. The preposition min, the noon disappears. And so you have it show up as a dogish in the first letter. And of course, if it is a guttural, that's going to be rejected, so it's going to cause other things to happen. Nahar becomes min nahar. Yom becomes miyom. It's the idea of a doubling dogish in that first letter of the noun. From a day, from a river, from a king. Okay? Yes, Chad.
The wording in the book is a little different. Instead of before non-gutturals, it says when a noon stands vowelless between two consonants. Is that the same thing?
That's the same thing, because that's what would happen if you kept it. If you kept it, that's what would happen. It'd be vowelless, because you have short hirik, and you'd put a schwa under it when you join the word. That's why on the right-hand side in your book, like on page 59, the right-hand side, notice that you have mimelech instead of min melech. Because if you attempted to add the min to the word as min, the noon has to have a vowel. And if it's going to maintain the pronunciation min, then you'd have a silent schwa under it. But instead of doing that, the Hebrew then assimilates that and disappears. So all the wording there is talking about the process of what it would have been if you just attached it, but what they do not want, and so it changes to this. Okay? But we're saying the same thing. One's looking at it from this process that was involved in moving from one to the other, and this one's just looking at the end result. Okay? All right, rule number 2. Before gutturals, noon is assimilated and the hirik heightened to tsere, to compensate. Adam, a man. Me Adam, from a man. Why the tsere instead of a hirik? Because the noon cannot be compensated for by a doubling dogish and a guttural, because a guttural what? It rejects doubling dogish. So since it rejects doubling dogish, then we compensate. Remember what we did with Adam, with the article, ha-Adam? It's not ha with a pathic and a dogish, because the aleph rejects the doubling dogish of the article, so we compensated by heightening the pathic short vowel to the long comments vowel, so it's ha-Adam. It's exactly the same process and the same rule, It's a different vowel. It goes from a short hirik, but instead of going to a long hirik yod, which you have to add a yod in there, it's easier to make the short hirik heighten to a tseri. And that's why on the one chart on page, I think, 39 of your textbook, you have a chart that shows the I and E class vowels together, because an I class vowel can move to a higher form by going to a tseri instead of a hirik yod. All right? So it becomes me adam. And the tseri tells you there's compensation from a hirik to a tseri to account for the rejected doubling dogish that would normally be there for the noon that has been assimilated. Okay? Regel becomes me regel. Hadar becomes me hadar.